Welcome back to the Paige Kornblue Show. You know, I can't keep up with life, let alone politics. So when I'm lucky enough to snatch a few minutes with political experts like Scott Spradling, I jump on it. And I have to share it because he breaks down politics and the events going on in Washington and across our country and around our world beautifully. Top political analyst and television news veteran Scott Spradling of the Scott Spradling Group, my dear friend, former WMUR news anchor colleague, joins us now on the PK Show. Scott?
Paige, it's so good to catch up with you. Oh my gosh, it's always wonderful to reconnect. And I was kind of thinking about this conversation we were going to have, and I was thinking, you know, whether you're a political junkie or someone who sort of stumbles into the wrong conversation at the cocktail party and all of a sudden it's about politics, the amount of information you need to know to sound smart and be engaged is actually about the same, and you don't have to go like super deep into it. So maybe this can be like a user-friendly, here's the catch-up, here's what you say at the party.
Let's do it. Let's break it down, Lexi, because that's what we need. The season down here, definitely in South Florida, is about to begin, and I know up your way as well. So we need to know what we're talking about, and I don't know, how do we not start with the mugshot?
Right? I mean, so here's where we are at. In a weird way, it's a Groundhog Day in that everything Donald Trump is doing is unprecedented. So now we've got unprecedented Donald Trump, the courtroom edition, right? 4 completely different lawsuits. The first time ever, former presidential mugshot. Charges that range from being involved with January 6th and the attempt of the attack on the Capitol, or you've got conversations around whether he manipulated outcomes with the Georgia election and tried to change those outcomes. So there's a lot at stake, and it sounds like the primary votes state to state and the courtroom visits state to state are going to happen pretty much simultaneously. Once again, unprecedented stuff.
And you looked at all the other mugshots. You know, there were not as many big players there, but there were a lot of them involved when they lined them all up. Oh, my goodness, right?
Yeah. And listen, there's a lot at stake. I mean, no matter how you feel about whether you think the fix is in and this is the justice system that's being weaponized by a political leader, or you've got a former president who maybe made some really horrible and illegal decisions and is going to potentially pay the price for it. This is serious times. These are serious charges across the board. And Paige, one thing that's interesting to me is, not surprisingly, look at the polls. Democrats all think that he's done something wrong. A vast majority of independent voters think that he most likely did something wrong. And an increasing number of Republicans are thinking he did something wrong. Now, that's a small minority. It's like around 15% or so, but that number keeps growing. It was in the single digits a few months ago. So there is that sort of American sense that, well, where there's smoke, there's fire. So we'll see where it goes.
Is this situation different from any of the others? I mean, each time we think, oh, my goodness, this is big and a first.
So, yes. And the easiest way to just sort of divide it up is 3 of the cases have sort of federal charges tied to them. One of them, Georgia specifically, is all about state charges, which is why he had to go to a prison in Fulton County, had to be fingerprinted and mugshot, and why, if he's uniquely found guilty of trying to manipulate the election outcome in Georgia in 2020, he's actually facing penalties that cannot be pardoned. That's a whole other conversation, right? Oh, well, if he gets found guilty, but he's elected president, he can pardon himself. Legally, you can do that for federal charges. You can't do it for state charges, which is why there's so much attention on Georgia.
I see. So what do we say at the cocktail party about this one? No matter what side you're on.
For God's sake, change the subject. Honestly, I think, the acknowledgement that we are in a place in time in our American political system where we've never seen anything remotely like this before, and hopefully won't see it ever again. And quite frankly, so you're talking to a dude who's up in New Hampshire, where voters in New Hampshire's Republican presidential primary are going to be casting ballots in just over 4 months. Like, that's not long, folks. That's 120 days-ish. And so decisions are going to have to be made about who the leader of the party should be. And what I'm hearing up here is what I think we should say at the cocktail parties, which is, okay, that's the circus. Let's talk about the things that matter. Like, what are the issues that are going to help us with workforce and the economy and international politics and jobs and fuel prices, inflation? Like, that's where the conversations need to sort of be focused, if you will. I don't think any of us is really interested in the legal circus. We have to watch it play out. But it would be nice if the presidential election actually talked about issues that affect us every day.
So we worked alongside each other in New Hampshire, Iowa. So many of these places. All eyes on these spots, especially here in the campaign trail. What's it looking like right now?
It's really active. In fact, your governor, Ron DeSantis, has been making plenty of visits to New Hampshire. I mean, we've got a field of roughly a dozen major Republican candidates. That includes former President Trump, who has been to New Hampshire multiple times. So by all measures and all rights, we're seeing TV ads. There's social media ads, lots of town hall visits, lots of visits by people like Ron DeSantis, Tim Scott, the senator from South Carolina, Nikki Haley, the former UN ambassador, Vivek Ramaswamy, who's a new voice. He's a businessman, a billionaire from Ohio who's only 38, who's a new face on the campaign trail. Mike Pence is up here quite a bit. So it is very much what Floridians would expect the active campaign trail to look like in the fall going into a November election. We're already feeling that with the presidential primary. Lots of action.
Governor Ron DeSantis, you mentioned you saw a lot of him in New Hampshire. Where do you think he stands right now? I know he left early to return to Florida for the tropical storm intensifying this week. But how's it looking for him?
You know, that's a good question. I think if you had asked me that question 2 weeks ago, I would be saying two things. One, Floridians know this man a whole lot better than Granite Staters do, and we're still learning who he is and what makes him tick. With that said, the national media coverage around his campaign has been focusing on things like the amount of money he's spending and whether it's good spending, who's running the campaign and the fact that he had to just make a change, whether he's lost momentum, is he really the number two in the race and an alternative. Up here in New Hampshire, it's gotten a lot more competitive. Believe it or not, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie has surged. Nikki Haley, as I said, has surged in the polls. So Ron DeSantis right now finds himself in a bit of a firefight for second place in New Hampshire, given the snapshot polls right now as the alternative to Donald Trump, who leads in the polls. But the debate he did last week, while he may not have emerged as like the rock star, universal, unanimous pick as the winner of the debate, he didn't hurt himself. So I think he continues to have life up here, and he continues to do visits. He's doing a lot of focus on Iowa, though. I think his strategy is got to campaign well in Iowa and use that momentum to win here.
How's it looking on the Democratic side right now?
So it's interesting that you ask that, Paige, because obviously everybody focuses on the president's reelection, Joe Biden, Joe Biden, Joe Biden. But we have two Democrats, one who's a Kennedy name, Joe Kennedy Jr., who is up here and campaigning aggressively. And so is, oh my God, I forgot her name. That's embarrassing. But you've got two Dems who are running up in New Hampshire. And so I'm not saying that Joe Biden will lose New Hampshire, but he doesn't have a whole lot of friends up here, especially since the Democratic National Committee tried to strip New Hampshire of its first-in-the-nation presidential status. So the Democratic Party is a little bit persona non grata up here from the national perspective. And so there are candidates campaigning. There is a bit of an active primary. Those visits are happening. And while I would certainly think that Joe Biden will still win the New Hampshire primary, the numbers might be surprising because there's not a great deal of love for Joe Biden, the candidate or the president here in New Hampshire. Poll numbers show that he's not very popular.
Marianne Williamson.
Thank you.
Welcome.
That's
okay. You can list the names way more than I can historically.
That's perfect. So yes, Marianne Williamson, and my apologies to Williamson supporters out there because she's been up here, and so it's been active. There's more of a primary vibe for Dems up in New Hampshire than you ever would have thought for a sitting president running for re-election. All
right, two more questions for you before we let you go. Overall, the state of our nation, what would you say where it stands right now?
You know, I would say we're sort of mostly cloudy with hopefully an optimistic sunshine on the horizon. There's still a lot of, aggressiveness in our American political system, a lot of claims and counterclaims, a lot of three-ring circus vibes, and not a lot of collaboration, cooperation. We're a divided nation, and there's a lot of anger. And my hope is that as we move through the next election cycle, we move, no matter what, to options for voters to be able to let their voices reinforce the message that I think all of us wish to embrace, which is, can we all just gear down a little bit? Can we all just back down calm down and start tackling problems that face all of us together instead of creating this sort of almost political civil war that we find ourselves in.
Let's do that. Let's do that, please, right?
Yes,
we can all just do that. So what's happening
please.
next? What do we need to, what's our homework and what should we look for?
All right. So for the cocktail party folks that want to sound smart, in September, there will be another Republican presidential primary debate. And so I would say watch, even if you don't watch the whole thing, watch 30 minutes of it. Catch the vibe of who's out there on stage and what's going on. And I mean, honestly, it's a keep your powder dry Florida kind of a situation, right? Because you got a ways to go before the candidates are really starting to come to town. But guaranteed, as a battleground state, even though it's been more Republican lately, it's still such an important state. So I would just say watch the news wires, watch a couple of the debates. You can get a vibe and start, listening to these folks to see who might be the best leader of our country.
All right. Scott, how can people connect with you?
With me?
Yeah.
So my website is spradlinggroup.com. I am SpradNH on Twitter, and I love to sort of retweet the articles and voices that I think are helping to advance the conversation. And so, look for me on social media. I'd love to be a part of the conversation with what's going on in Florida, especially since I was born in Fort Lauderdale. So I'm kind of part of the club.
Yes, you are. Well, come on down, all right? And we'll come up your way for the changing of the leaves. It's about time.
I love it.
All right, Scott,
I love it.
Thank you so much for your time and breaking it all down for us. Really appreciate it, as always.
Thanks, Paige. Thank you so much.
All right. I will put all those links on my website. That's paigekornblue.com, Paige with an I and Kornblue with a K, and at Paige Kornblue Media on Instagram and Twitter, too, at Paige Kornblue. It's all there. It's everywhere. Until next time, everybody, cheers.